Welcome back to Jenny's Tales. Tonight's story is about love, trust, and a betrayal that went unnoticed for years. A man worked day and night in a foreign country, sending $10,000 every month to the woman he loved. He believed he was building a future for both of them. A home, a life, a dream. But thousands of miles away, that dream was already broken. Because while he was sacrificing everything for her, she was living a completely different life. A life he knew nothing about. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just break his heart. It changed everything. Daniel Harris was known as a hardworking and disciplined man. Years earlier, he had left his hometown to work overseas in a high-paying construction management job. The work was difficult, the hours were long, and the environment was harsh. But Daniel had a purpose. Back home, his wife Sophia lived in a comfortable house that Daniel had paid for. Every month, without fail, he sent her $10,000. It was more than enough to cover expenses, savings, and a luxurious lifestyle. Daniel trusted her completely. Phone calls were short but regular. Messages were simple. Sophia always reassured him that everything was fine. She spoke about missing him, about waiting for his return, about the future they would soon share together. Daniel believed every word. He imagined the day he would finally return home for good. The long years of separation would end. The sacrifices would finally feel worth it. What he didn't know was that life back home had quietly changed. At first, the changes were small. Sophia began going out more often. New friends appeared in her life. Expensive clothes, late nights, and unexplained absences slowly became part of her routine. But to the outside world, everything still looked perfect. A loyal wife. A successful husband working abroad. A stable life. No one suspected anything. And Daniel, thousands of miles away, had no reason to doubt the person he trusted the most. But sometimes, the truth doesn't reveal itself all at once. It hides. It waits. And when it finally comes out, it comes out all at once. Life in the small town continued as usual, at least on the surface. Neighbors still greeted Sophia with polite smiles. The house remained well-maintained, the bills were always paid on time, and nothing seemed out of place. To anyone looking from the outside, it appeared that Sophia was simply a wife waiting patiently for her husband to return. But behind closed doors, things had begun to change. At first, the changes were small and almost unnoticeable. Sophia started going out more frequently. She began meeting new people, attending gatherings, and spending evenings away from home. It started as an occasional outing, something harmless, something easy to explain. Loneliness, after all, can be quiet but powerful. Months passed, and those small changes slowly turned into habits. Late nights became normal. Phone calls with Daniel became shorter. Sometimes she would miss his calls entirely, later sending a message explaining she had been busy or tired. Daniel never questioned it. He trusted her. And that trust gave Sophia complete freedom. Among the new people in her life was a man named Ryan. Ryan was different from anyone she had known before. He was confident, charming, and always present. Unlike Daniel, who existed only through calls and messages, Ryan was there in real life. He listened, he laughed, and he filled the silence that had grown in Sophia's life. At first, their conversations were simple. Casual meetings. Friendly talks. Nothing more. But over time, something shifted. The distance between them grew smaller. The conversations became more personal. And slowly, the line between friendship and something else began to disappear. Sophia knew it was wrong. She knew Daniel was working tirelessly, sending money every month without fail, believing in a future that no longer existed the same way. But emotions have a way of ignoring logic. And once the line is crossed, it becomes easier to cross it again. Soon, Ryan was no longer just a friend. He became a part of her daily life. They spent more time together. Went out often. Shared moments that were meant to belong to someone else. The house that Daniel had paid for no longer felt like his. It became a place where secrets lived, where laughter echoed for the wrong reasons, where loyalty slowly faded into something else. And still, Daniel knew nothing. Every month, the money arrived. Every month, Sophia reassured him that everything was fine. She spoke about love, about patience, about waiting. And Daniel believed it all. Because from his side of the world, nothing had changed. But in reality, everything had. What started as loneliness had turned into a double life. A life built on silence, secrets, and choices that could not be undone. And the most dangerous part of it all was not the betrayal itself. It was the belief that it would never be discovered. For a long time, Daniel never questioned anything. His days were filled with work, long hours under harsh conditions, and the constant pressure of responsibility. Every paycheck he earned had a purpose. Every sacrifice he made was for the future he believed was waiting for him back home. But slowly, something began to feel different. At first, it was just small things. Sophia's voice on the phone had changed. It wasn't obvious, but there was a distance that hadn't been there before. Conversations that once felt warm and full of emotion had become shorter, quieter, almost routine. There were more pauses, more distractions, more moments where it felt like her mind was somewhere else. Daniel noticed, but he said nothing. Trust has a way of silencing doubt. Still, the feeling didn't go away. Then came the missed calls. Sophia had always been careful to answer, or at least return his calls quickly. But now there were times when hours passed before she responded. The explanations were always simple. I was out with friends. I fell asleep early. My phone was on silent. Each reason sounded normal. Each one made sense. And yet, something felt off. Daniel began to hold on to these small moments. Not enough to accuse, not enough to question directly, but enough to create a quiet unease that stayed with him. One evening, during a video call, something unusual happened. For a brief second, before Sophia adjusted her camera, a shadow moved behind her. It was quick, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. Daniel paused. Was someone there? He asked calmly. Sophia smiled immediately, shaking her head. No, just the TV. Her answer came too quickly, too smoothly. Daniel said nothing, but the image stayed in his mind long after the call ended. Days later, another small detail appeared. A photo Sophia posted online caught his attention. It looked harmless at first, a dinner at a restaurant, a table with 2 plates, soft lighting, nothing unusual. But Daniel noticed something in the reflection of the glass window behind her. A figure. A man. Sitting across from her. The angle was unclear, the face not visible, but the presence was undeniable. Daniel stared at the image for a long time. There could be an explanation. A friend. A group dinner. Something simple. Something normal. But the feeling in his chest said otherwise. For the first time, doubt began to grow into something stronger. Something harder to ignore. Still, he chose silence. Not because he didn't care, but because he wasn't ready to face what those signs might mean. Thousands of miles away, Daniel continued working. Sending money. Holding on to the belief that everything was still the same. But the truth had already begun to surface. Not all at once. Not clearly. But in small, quiet pieces. And sometimes, those small pieces are the most dangerous ones. Because they slowly build a reality that cannot be avoided forever. And soon, Daniel would reach a point where silence was no longer an option. The feeling of doubt no longer faded. It stayed with Daniel, growing quietly with each passing day. At work, his focus began to slip. Tasks that once felt routine now required effort. His mind kept returning to the same thoughts, the missed calls, the shadow in the background, the reflection in the photo. Individually, each detail seemed small. But together, they formed something harder to ignore. Daniel knew one thing. He needed to be sure. For the first time in years, he made a decision without telling Sophia. He booked a flight home. No warning. No announcement. No explanation. If everything was truly fine, the visit would simply be a surprise. But if it wasn't, he would finally know the truth. The journey felt longer than usual. Hours passed, but his thoughts never slowed down. Every possibility crossed his mind. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Or maybe everything had already changed. When Daniel finally arrived in his hometown, the air felt familiar, but something inside him felt different. He didn't go home immediately. Instead, he went to a nearby street, one that gave him a clear view of the house. The house he had paid for. The place he believed was still his home. From a distance, everything looked normal. The lights were on. The curtains slightly open. Nothing seemed out of place. But Daniel waited. Minutes passed. Then something happened. A car slowly pulled into the driveway. Daniel's eyes fixed on it. A man stepped out. Calm, comfortable, familiar. Not like a visitor. Like someone who belonged there. Daniel's chest tightened. He watched as the man walked to the front door and entered without knocking. Without hesitation. Without permission. Like it wasn't the first time. And in that moment, the truth became impossible to ignore. Daniel didn't move. He sat in silence, staring at the house. Every doubt, every small sign, every uneasy feeling suddenly connected into one clear reality. But even then, part of him needed confirmation. He needed to see it with his own eyes. Slowly, Daniel stepped out of the car and walked toward the house. Each step felt heavier than the last. The distance between him and the door felt longer than it ever had before. When he reached the front door, he paused. The silence inside felt unnatural. Then, faintly, laughter. Not just one voice. Two. Daniel's hand tightened into a fist. Without knocking, he pushed the door open. What he saw inside froze everything. Sophia stood in the living room. And beside her, the man from the car. Ryan. They were close. Too close. Comfortable. Like there was nothing to hide. For a moment, no one spoke. Time felt still. Sophia's expression changed instantly. Shock. Fear. Panic. Daniel, she whispered. The word barely left her lips. Ryan stepped back, clearly unprepared for what was happening. But Daniel said nothing. His silence was heavier than any words. Years of trust. Years of sacrifice. Years of sending money, believing in something that no longer existed. All of it collapsed in a single moment. Sophia tried to speak, but the words didn't come easily. Nothing she could say would undo what had already been seen. Nothing could erase the truth standing right in front of him. Daniel looked around the house slowly. The furniture he had paid for. The space he believed was still his. Now filled with someone else's presence. Someone else's life. Finally, Daniel spoke. Not loudly. Not angrily. But calmly. Since when? The question hung in the air. And the answer would change everything. The silence in the room felt heavy. Sophia stood frozen, her mind searching for words that refused to come. Ryan had already stepped back, creating distance, as if trying to disappear from a situation that could no longer be hidden. Daniel's question still echoed. Since when? It was simple, but it carried years of trust within it. Sophia looked down, unable to meet his eyes. At first, it was nothing, she said quietly. Just someone to talk to. Her voice trembled. But then, things changed. Daniel didn't interrupt. Didn't react. He simply listened. Because the truth, no matter how painful, needed to be heard completely. It's been months, she admitted. Months. The word alone was enough. Months of lies. Months of false reassurance. Months of believing in something that had already ended. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief moment. Not out of anger, but to hold himself together. The room felt smaller now. Everything inside it, every piece of furniture, every corner, felt unfamiliar. Like a place that no longer belonged to him. Ryan finally spoke. I didn't know things were like this, he said, his voice uncertain. But Daniel didn't look at him. Because this wasn't about him. It never was. This was about trust. And how easily it had been broken. Daniel turned his attention back to Sophia. For years, he said calmly, everything I did was for this home. His voice remained steady, but the weight behind it was clear. I worked day and night. I sent money every month. I believed in us. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. But it was too late. Some moments cannot be undone. Some choices cannot be taken back. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel reached into his bag and placed a small envelope on the table. Sophia looked at it, confused. "What is this?" she asked softly. Daniel answered without hesitation. "Everything ends today." Inside the envelope were documents, property papers, bank details, legal transfers. Over the past few weeks, without saying a word, Daniel had already begun preparing for this moment. The house, the accounts, everything he had built, had already been moved out of her control. Sophia's hands trembled as she looked through the papers. "What is this?" she whispered again, her voice breaking. Daniel looked at her one last time. Calm, controlled, final. "A lesson," he said. There was no shouting, no dramatic anger, just silence. Because sometimes silence carries more pain than words ever could. Daniel turned and walked toward the door. Each step felt lighter than the last. Not because the pain was gone, but because the truth was finally clear. Outside, the air felt different. The same streets, the same town, but nothing inside him was the same anymore. Behind him, the life he once believed in had ended. But ahead of him was something new, something real, something honest. And sometimes the hardest endings are the ones that set a person free. And that is the story of a man who gave everything, only to realize that not everyone deserves it.